Just to kick us off, Chicken and Egg Films, we are a nonprofit organization and we support and champion women and gender expansive documentary filmmakers from around the globe with funding, mentorship, and access so that they can tell stories that ignite change. So welcome. My name is Kyoko McCrae. I am the program director at Chicken and Egg Films and I go by she, her. Will, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Will Tamura. I am the program coordinator for Chicken and Egg Films. I use they, them pronouns.
And my name is Eva Dimitrova. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the program manager at Chicken and Egg Films.
Great, thank you so much. And there's also one other person that I want to mention who is not on our webinar today, but Alicia Stokes is our senior program manager who manages the research and development grant, who is on leave right now. But she's really been instrumental in running this program, so wanted to mention her before we kick off. All right, over to you, Eva.
Okay, so a couple things before Kyoko and we'll take over the main part of this webinar session. It's that just to mention we have closed captioning. So if you need captions, you can click on the closed caption button at the bottom of your screen. And you can say show captions and you can move the caption box around on the screen. And I'm also putting, I'm going to put in the chat a separate stream text link that you can click on and follow like on a separate browser tab, the full transcript of the session. We want to thank Sherry Patty as our captioner today. She's behind the screens writing those captions. And we also want to welcome two of our ASL interpreters, Janelle Holness and Alicia Lewis. They're going to be switching on and off throughout the session. And so if you need to pin one of them so you can see them more clearly, you can click on the three dots at the upper right of their box and click pin.
Great. Thank you so much, Eva. So we're going to go over what this session is about. We're not going to be able to cover everything in its entirety. There's a lot of information, but we're hoping to drive home the most important points. Certainly the purpose of the research and development grant. There are some changes to the open call, so we want to make sure to highlight those this year. New changes, eligibility criteria. We'll go over who can apply for this and what projects are eligible, the timeline for the program. We have an application fee that we're going to get into, which has some changes this year, so we'll get into that. A note about the use of AI. The distinction between research and development, you might be considering one or the other, and so we'll talk about how those are different. And then an overview of all the application questions. We will not be able to get into all of the questions in detail, but we want to give you an overview of what will be in the application, how we're evaluating these applications, so going over evaluation criteria. And then we'll talk about grant impact and the list of activities that we'll be asking for in the application. For those who may be reapplying, we want to go over that and then a step-by-step of how to apply in our new platform this year. So that's a lot of information. One thing I want to point out that Eva is going to put in the chat is a link to the research and development application guide. So that's a PDF, it's a separate PDF that you can look over and goes into more details on the application, especially the application questions themselves. So that's a really helpful guide to be looking at as we go over this webinar. We're not going to be following the format of the guide itself, but it's just a helpful PDF to have as we go through this webinar. All right. So an overview of the 2026 R&D grant. This is now in our fourth year. So we're really excited to be able to offer this again. And for this research and development grant, you have to have directed at least one feature-length documentary, which we're defining as the length being 48 minutes or longer. The film needs to be in the research or development stage for this next feature-length documentary, and we'll get into more of that later. So this is not a grant for first-time documentary feature directors. If you are working on your first feature, we would encourage you to look at our Accelerator Lab program, which is explicitly for first and second time feature directors. So the purpose of the research and development grant is to support projects at the very early stages of their life cycle. We're really excited to be able to offer this because we know that some of the first funding for a new feature is really hard to come by. So it is intended to be at early stages of the film. And you are eligible to apply if you've already received other development funding. That's great if you've already started to get some more support. But we do want you to think about how much you've raised. If you've raised over 35% of your film's total budget, and that is not that's not a hard line, 35%, but to give you an idea of projects that we're looking to support, if you have raised more than 50% or significantly more than 35%, and you have shot a substantial amount of footage, you may not be competitive for this grant. Unless you can really clearly demonstrate specific needs for the project that requires you to do some more research or some more development on certain aspects of the project, even if you've already gone into production. So you would really have to demonstrate why you might have previously overlooked research that you need to do or more development on the film as things have evolved and changed with your film. But again, it's really intended to be for earlier projects, not projects that are in late production and are almost fully funded, for instance. I think we can move on. So we wanted to just give a breakdown of applicants now that this is our fourth open call. This is the breakdown of applicants versus grantees that we've had in the first 3 years of offering the research and development grants. So you'll see the numbers have steadily increased over the years, starting with 169 applicants in 2023 up to 363 in this last year. We have overall gotten more applications for development versus research, but as you'll see, we do give out grants that are, not quite 50-50, but, roughly about half that go to development and half to research. And we'll get into like why and which stage and the differences in the application. Yeah. It's just information I think that's helpful for you to see, also in terms of like competitiveness between research and development. So it's a little more competitive for development.
We also wanted to talk through a few of the changes to the open call process. The first important change is that we've updated application questions to be in line with the Core App 3.1, which came out this year. We've also transitioned to SurveyMonkey Apply as our platform. If you've applied to Chicken and Egg in the past, we had used Salesforce, and now we are using SurveyMonkey Apply thanks to all the hard work of Eva. And just as a note, it uses word counts instead of character counts. So the word counts for questions are now in line with the Core App 3.1. We hope this helps streamline some of your applications. We have also introduced an early bird deadline, which is a month ahead of the final deadline to apply. And these deadlines correspond to different application fees, which we'll talk about now. Next, yes. So the application fees. The early bird deadline to apply is Wednesday, January 7th at 11:59 p.m. and this fee will be $20. And the final application deadline is for Wednesday, February 4th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And this application fee will be $35. And we just wanted to note that And more information about why we charge application fees can be found on our website under the FAQ section. Another note that we wanted to give was that when you register on SurveyMonkey Applies site, you'll be able to set your local time zone, and the final deadline will show the corresponding time in your local zone. So it will hopefully help you as the deadline approaches. And just as a note, any late applications will not be accepted. All right, and so we wanted to now talk about who can apply and what kind of projects are eligible. So, in terms of applicant eligibility, we ask that you identify as a woman, cis or trans or gender expansive director. And just as a note, gender expansive is an umbrella term that we use that includes any person whose gender identity or gender expression does not comply with the socially defined gender norms and roles of their culture. This includes, but is not limited to, non-binary, trans, third gender, two-spirit, and agender individuals. The other eligibility requirement we ask for is that you can be based in anywhere in the world except for countries which are under comprehensive U.S. sanctions. We also have more information about this available on our website. And the last note about eligibility on this slide is that, and in terms of narrative features, documentary shorts, or medium length films, or films where you're listed as the producer but not the director, are not eligible. And so, in terms of experience, we ask that you have directed at least one feature-length documentary, which we define as an independently produced film that is at least 48 minutes in length. And the film must be completed to be considered for this requirement. We ask that if you are currently directing your first feature-length film, you not be eligible to apply until that film is completed and has premiered or is completed, and at the time of applying has a confirmed world premiere at a festival taking place before the end of May. In short, we ask that the film must have premiered before final selections are made. We also ask that it be independently produced. However, commissioned documentaries and television documentaries, including those produced for news and journalism outlets, are eligible to be considered as prior work if the director has had creative control. Feature-length narrative work is not eligible to be considered as prior work for this application. And then we also ask that, so it has to be a documentary or nonfiction film, including hybrid docs. VR, interactive, branded content, or fiction films are not eligible. For projects, they have to be feature length, 48 minutes or more. Short and medium length films or series are not eligible. And in terms of the project stage, it has to be in the research or development. Please refer to the section project stage, research versus development in the program and application guide, which is linked on the R&D webpage for more information on what we consider each stage to be. And it must be independently produced. Works for hire are not eligible, and student films produced in an undergraduate or graduate program are also not eligible.
Thanks, Will. We just have a quick note about hybrid films, and we could probably have a 3-hour session on what is a hybrid film. So we're not going to get too detailed on this, but the main point that we want to drive home here is that we really want the films that we're supporting to be documentary films and intended to be documentary films. We also recognize that that things can change over the course of making a film, but we sort of have an evolving definition of a hybrid documentary, but we consider it to be a film that does incorporate fictional or scripted elements as a formal device, but in which it's clear to the viewer which elements are fiction and which are not. The incorporation of fictionalized elements is used as a way to further explore the main themes of the film or even question the nature of fact and reality. But they really should be externally thought of as a finished film. The finished film should be thought of as a documentary and intended to be programmed and characterized in the press as a documentary or a hybrid documentary and not as a narrative or fiction film. We do not consider narrative memoir, speculative fiction, or docudramas, dramas that are based on a true story, as hybrid documentaries. But generally speaking, I would say we have quite an expansive idea of what hybrid films are. So we do encourage filmmakers to apply if you have a hybrid film. But again, it should be really grounded in documentary and be intended to be a documentary as it's finished film. All right, we can move on. So an additional question around eligibility. First of all, you should only be submitting one application per cycle in the research and development grant. So if you have more than one eligible project, please select which project you will submit for consideration. You may apply for either the research grant or development grant, but not both categories, and not for two different films. This is a good moment to, I don't know if I mentioned this in the beginning, but I think we are taking questions in the chat. And we will get to questions and answers at the end of the session. We have about, I think, 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. So feel free to add your questions to the chat. So I'll just finish this point on the Q&A because there is a specific Q&A chat function at the bottom of Zoom. So if you want to put in your questions there, what we're going to be doing is keeping track of these questions, and we'll get to them at the end of the webinar. So feel free to add those as we go along. So I think I was saying that you can't apply for both the research and development grant. So you can't apply for both categories. But if you have a producer who's attached to the project, and they're working with another director on another project, it's fine for there to be multiple submissions with the same producer, but not the same director. Additionally, you cannot apply with the same project for both the research and development grant, as well as the accelerator lab, which is for production in the same year. So for accelerator lab, it has to be either your first or second feature. So in terms of career stage, if you could apply, for some of you, if this is your second feature, you'd have to make a choice of whether or not to apply for research and development or accelerator lab, based on the stage of your project. Additionally, if your project has already received R&D support previously from another program, such as if you were an awardee of the 23, 24, or 25 Research and Development Grant, or if you received the Chicken and Egg Award for a project that was in development or research, or Critical Issues Fund, you are not eligible to apply for this grant. Meaning, you can't apply for this grant if it's already been funded for this stage of research and development. However, you are welcome to apply with a new project. And you also can apply for the Accelerator Lab in another year, in the future year. So if you receive R&D in 26 and your project progresses, and again, this is your second feature, then you could apply for Accelerator Lab the following year, assuming it has advanced further into production.
We just wanted to give an overview of the timeline. This includes the open call, the review, and disbursement timeline. So right now we're December 15th for the webinar, and then we have the reminder for the deadlines, the early bird deadline being January 7th, and the regular deadline being February 4th. And once you've submitted your application between February and June 2026, we'll be conducting our review of applications in a two-round process, which is a combination of external reviewers and program staff. Around mid-July 2026 is when applicants will be notified of final decisions, and from there until August, roughly, is when the grants will be dispersed. In the fall of 2026 is when we will do our public announcement for grant recipients. And then beyond that, that's the grant period. And we will then check in with you around May or June of 2027 regarding the status of your projects. We have a few deliverables and reporting which are detailed in the application guide, and grantees will need to submit the required deliverables before applying to another C&E program. So we want to be able to check in on the status of your project before we receive any additional applications for funding, should you want to apply for the Accelerator Lab if you are eligible.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's just an important note to look at the guide and make sure that you're clear on what the required deliverables and reporting are before you apply, to make sure that that's something that you would be able to complete the program year with. All right. A note about use of AI. AI is everywhere. Everybody's using it. But we really discourage using tools like ChatGPT to write your grant application, largely because of a concern about exposing your own intellectual property to unknown actors who then use it to teach their language models and share with others. You're really putting your IP out there into the world when you use things like ChatGPT to write a grant application. And it also just diminishes your own authentic voice, which we really love to come through in your application. So we are seeing an increase of applicants using ChatGPT in the applications, and most of the time using AI results in a hard to read and hard to understand application because a lot of the clarity and specificity of the proposal is lost, making it overall a less competitive application. Also want to differentiate things like ChatGPT, which is really helping to write the content of your could be used to write the content of your application versus AI tools like Grammarly, Google Translate, or spelling and grammar aids. We recognize that those can be really helpful tools in, especially if English is not your first language. So we completely understand the use of those kinds of aids and how they can be really helpful in your application. Um, so those are allowed, but we wanted to differentiate the different types of tools and just share our own thoughts on AI.
We wanted to talk a bit more about the distinction between research and development. We know that these two stages can be a little murky sometimes, so we wanted to present a few of the intended sort of activities that we find fall into either category. So beginning with research, the research stage is a period of sowing and ideation. So some potential activities can include identifying secondary sources such as literature, art, and cultural materials, familiarizing oneself with other film projects, identifying primary sources and collaborators, locating visual assets and archives, identifying and tracking potential or multiple storylines, finding a narrative framework that can support the film, and building foundational relationships with the community and collaborators at the center of the story. So these are sort of activities that we see as falling into this category, not really entering production yet, just sort of having an idea and wanting to explore what is the potential and the sort of sources you can look into in developing your film. Whereas with development, it's a bit more nuanced in terms of the exploration and discovery, sort of entering that stage right before production. And some of those activities can include gaining and securing access to core participants and collaborators and starting shooting, developing the story, plotting the film's multiple and intersecting timelines, fine-tuning the development budget and creating a fundraising strategy, creating fundraising materials such as a pitch deck, trailer, teaser, testing pitch materials for resonance at pitch venues with potential funders, and engaging possible partners. So you've sort of gone beyond the ideation stage. You have secured some elements of your film, and you want to be able to kick off to reach that next stage.
Okay. All right, so there's a lot of information here, but we're trying to summarize everything that you're going to need in your application. So Will mentioned earlier that we are now using the core app version 3.1, and so the following questions here on the left column are going to appear in both applications, both for research and development. So we're not going to get into all of these, but they're all in the core app. And if if you're interested in seeing how, let's say you have a version of this application from the previous core app, you can go to IDA's site to look at the differences between this version and the last version. But again, I'm not going to go into all of the details of this. I will mention though, your prior work is going to be really important. As we've mentioned earlier, you have to have made at least one feature documentary. I think in the application, you're able to submit up to two previous feature works. Of course, if you only have one, that's fine too. If you do list more than one feature, we encourage you to put the film that you feel um, strongest about, your strongest feature, put that at the very tops, because not all reviewers are required to watch in full both of your previous features. So put the strongest one at the top so it's clear that we should be looking at that one first. Supplemental questions in both research and development questions are going to include a question that is not in the core app. It's the access to story/participants. And the reason why we have that is because the core app used to have a question on access, but it now has a question in the core app connection and point of view, which is really more about how you've come to work with the participants and less about, details on how much access you have. So that is a question that we have in there to better understand. It's more about like the feasibility of the project and where you're at. How are you trying to gain access? What part of the process you're in, gaining access to participants. And then change statement, that's one I want to highlight. It's unique to us, and it is really intended for us to better understand how you feel your film and the way that you're making this film challenges mainstream narratives, perceptions, assumptions that are out there about either the people portrayed in your film, the subject matter, the issues. So we're really interested in the potential that your film has to create change. And we don't necessarily mean, creating policy changes. It's not a question about impact. I want to be really clear about that. It's not asking for your plans for impact. You may not have plans for impact, but this is really about, in the filmmaking process, how are you trying to create change by challenging and disrupting dominant narratives that exist on this subject matter. Filmography, your list of films. I think previously we've asked for a resume, but really what we're interested in most is your filmography. We're going to get into this in more detail later, but we do ask for a list of completed activities versus the planned activities, which relates to the grant impact question in the core app. But it can be a bullet form list of things that you've already completed and things that you are planning on doing. And I also want to point out that this is different than the project stage and timeline, which is more about the overall project. If you're applying for development, you should be starting to think about what the production timeline for the film is. So that's what that relates to versus the planned activities, which is really specific to this stage of whether you're in research or development, what do you plan to do with the grant, and what are the activities that you plan to do that would be funded by this grant. I think this is an optional question, additional support needed beyond funding, but we're always interested in, understanding what your needs are. And so these additional questions that are only for development, these are also in the core app. These are also core app questions, the first four. And then a development budget breakdown. Yeah, just trying to understand. It's not a budget for the entire film, but for this stage of the project, what is your budget to get you through development into production? This is also me. Okay. And just a note before we move into evaluation, all of the in the last application checklist slide, all of those questions you'll also be able to look at in the guide in more detail. So feel free to take a look at that. And again, like I said, most of these are core app questions, but they'll all be in details in the guide. You want to take a look at that supplemental PDF. All right, moving on to evaluation criteria. So we want to give you a sense of, how we're reviewing the applications so you can better prepare your application. So we can move on. So for the research stage, we're really looking at the proposed research idea, a proposal that outlines clear and compelling topics, themes, and questions that align with our mission. And what we mean by that is that we really, again, it's sort of related to this change statement question, how the approach to the film and the topics challenge mainstream narratives, conversations, or perceptions. We'll also be looking at your prior work. And this is both to look at the artistry of your prior work and to assess the confidence that we have in your execution, your ability to execute this current project. And it's totally fine if your past work has a very different aesthetic or style. Certainly doesn't have to be related to your current project in any way. It's more for us to understand, like I said, the artistry and competence of the director by looking at the previous work. So, we're excited when you have a new project that may be a departure from your past work. So, they don't have to relate to one another. The grant impact, we're going to be looking at the planned activities that you have and how well developed they are and specific they are to the needs of your project. So making sure that the next steps are clear and that the grant will have a big impact on advancing your project. So we were on access and accountability.
Sorry, Hannah.
Yeah, on the research one. So we want to understand how the director is thinking critically about their own role in the story and how they articulate why they are the best filmmaker to make this film. We want to understand the director's connection and access to the story, film participants, and the larger community that's involved. And it's really helpful for us to understand, I think whenever you're making a film, you have your own perspective and biases. So acknowledging how those perspectives and biases are going to impact how you tell the story, and the subject matter at hand. So we really want you to be thinking about the potential impacts and consequences of the filmmaking process on the participants, audience, crew, and other stakeholders. So we have similar but additional evaluation criteria for the development application. For development, we want to start to have a better understanding of the story and concept and themes, and that they align with our mission. The proposed narrative trajectory or concept, including potential character arcs, if applicable, are clear and compelling, and that the story challenges mainstream narratives, conversations, or perceptions. So for development, we will be asking for to fill out the artistic approach question, which is in the Quora app. So this is where we really want to start to understand if you have a clear and creative vision and approach to tackling the subject matter in the story. Um, if you have a current sample, you can submit it with your application, although it is not required. And, this can obviously help us to understand the approach that you're taking. Um, and I would also say if your prior work, again, it doesn't have to relate to your current work, but if there are things that you've explored in your prior work that relate to your current work, you feel free to reference that as well. That can be helpful for us to understand, or how you came about, how you landed on the style of your previous feature, talking about that process, that can also be helpful in describing the artistic approach because it is early. But what we really want to understand is your approach as an artist, how you are starting to think about the creative direction of the film. So anything that can help with that. Um, so I just talked about the prior work, but again, this is really to assess, our confidence in you to execute this current project and to understand your artistry. So put your strongest project at the top when you list those if you have multiple prior works. Grant impact, yeah, again, planned activities, and with development, you were asking for a little more information, so we want to see a budget for the development, and how are you approaching fundraising? How are you, either already secured some funds and are currently thinking about fundraising? Who are you going to be um, trying to fundraise with? Um, what are some funders that you are looking to approach? If awarded, the next steps are clear and the grant will have a big impact on advancing the project. And then access and positionality, I'm not going to read that again, but again, we had that in the last for research as well, but it's just really important for us to understand how you're approaching the story with care um, and awareness of your own positionality.
As Kyoko mentioned on the application checklist slide, we wanted to talk a little bit more around the completed and planned activities and grant impact section that's included on the application. And this is something that is on both the research and development applications. So we hope that during the grant period, running from July 2026 until May 2027, each grantee will have the resources to make significant progress and or take their project to the next stage, enabling them to seek and secure additional funding for their project. And as we mentioned earlier, in May, June 2027, we will schedule a check-in call with each grantee to discuss the status of their project. So on the application, there is a section for completed versus planned activities, and it's very important in terms of the review of your application. We just want to note that planned activities are not the same as the project stage and timeline. Project stage and timeline can include things further down the line in the next few years. Roughly when do you envision, sort of moving into production, post, and then completion? That can go in the project stage and timeline, but do not include the timeline in the section around completed and planned activities. We don't want to see production or post-production activities in that section. We only want you to include planned activities for the next stage of research and development for the project that will occur within the next 8 to 12-month time span after applying. It helps us to be able to evaluate, how the grant will really be able to help impact your film.
Yeah, and I'll just add that part of why we're emphasizing this is because we have seen people copy over the planned activities over to the project status and timeline. And again, they're two different questions. So
Yeah. And sometimes the project stage will be in the planned activities, so it
Hmm.
doesn't entirely help us evaluate it. Um, so as we say in the evaluation criteria, we're looking for a well-developed and specific list of planned activities that indicates you are clear on the next steps for the project and which gives us confidence that receiving the grant funds will allow you to make advances on the project within the grant period. We really want to understand how can this grant support you at this stage of the project. And we hope that within the 8-month grant period, the grant will enable each filmmaker to make significant progress and or take their project to the next stage. Sort of thinking through what is the work that you have done so far in the research or development stage, and what do you have planned next? We are really looking for specific things here. So these are some examples in terms of like completed activities. You've identified X number of potential participants and the month and year you've done that, or you've conducted pre-interviews and including the month and year. And then in the planned activities, it's visiting an archive, writing the first draft of the creative treatment, shooting some test materials or footage, or edit a trailer and a reel, depending if you're in development at that stage. So we really want just some tangible examples of how the grant can be used to impact your film.
Okay. All right, reapplying. Um, if you applied for a research grant last year, you can apply for research again or for development if the project has advanced. And if you are applying for a research and development grant this year, you can apply for the Accelerator Lab production grant next year if the film is your second feature as a director. However, starting this year, we want to make a note for repeat applicants that you can apply with a project up to 3 times. So if this is your third time submitting to the research and development grant with the same project, this will be your final round that you would be considered. Applications submitted more than 3 times will be disqualified. So it's important to think about, the strength of the application and is this the right time? Um, and it won't apply to that many people, but we are in our fourth year, so we want to make a note that, yeah, starting this year, you know, it'll be maximum of 3 times that you can apply with the same project. Um, and just a note here, please do not try to access the application via Salesforce. Use only SurveyMonkey apply. And I think, we're raising that because if you've applied in the past, you will have used the Salesforce platform. So this is one of the big changes that we're having this year, but we are moving to an entirely new platform, so SurveyMonkey, which we will get into more. All right. So Eva's going to walk us through a lot of this, but to begin, the step-by-step how to apply with this new platform. The first thing is going to be logging in, and creating a new SurveyMonk Apply account if you don't have one, and you can do that at the link there. There'll be a process of confirming your eligibility first. So after you click into the R&D program, click on the apply button, and the first step of this process will be an eligibility check to make sure that you are in fact eligible. So you'll complete a questionnaire to confirm that you meet all the requirements, and if you are eligible, you will be able to move forward with filling out the rest of the application. And you'll receive an email notification if you are not eligible. Um, when you're ready to finally submit the application, you will fill out and submit your application via the platform either by the early bird deadline, which again is January 7th at midnight or 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time, or by the regular deadline of Wednesday, February 4th, 11:59 p.m. We will not be accepting any late applications for any reason. You must submit your application via the platform by the deadline. Otherwise, you must wait until the 2027 application process. And that is really for us to stay on track. It is a very lengthy process that involves many, many external reviewers. So it's really important that we start on time for the whole review process. So that's the reason why we don't accept late applications. Um, all right, Eva, can I pass to you to get into more of the SurveyMonkey platform? Okay, well, I will do my best.
Yeah, we can tag team it too.
Okay, great. So we wanted to give you show you what this actually looks like so you have a sense of where to go to apply. So as you can see, if you click on the link that was on the previous page, and I believe this is on our website as well, it will take you to this home page and you will click on the 2026 Research and Development Grant where it says more, that's circled, and then it will take you here. Um, and so this has more information about the grant, and you're going to click on apply to begin your application.
And it's important, since this is a new platform, that you register on it. So this is sort of what the login registration page will look like. And I think Eva's highlighted where to click. Um, and so once you fill out your registration, it's really important you verify your email. So I believe once you've submitted it, it will give you this notification, and you need to click the send verification email.
Okay. Um,
And
yeah, so this is the eligibility form, which is sort of the pre-application, I believe. Um, and it'll walk you through whether or not you're eligible or not. So you'll do that by answering these questions.
yeah. And these questions, yes, are about sort of the project stage, if you're intending to apply for Accelerator Lab, if you've received prior support. And so once you do that pre-eligibility form, you can mark it as complete. And if you are not eligible for any reason, the rest of the application will not appear, and you will also not receive an email notification if you're not eligible. And if you are eligible, the rest of the application will appear. And then you have to make sure to scroll down on this section to see the full application. Uh, the other thing around, I think, SurveyMonkey is that you can add collaborators. So if you have a co-director or a producer who will be assisting you in filling out the application, they can also access it and edit and fill out the information alongside you. And you can do so by clicking the Add Collaborator section on the side panel. If you don't see the option to add collaborators, you need to go back to the application main page by clicking back to application. We really want to be as clear as possible. This is sort of moving through the application. When the section at the bottom shows up as marked as complete, that means you filled out everything. If there are multiple pages in each section, such as, project information or budget and grant use, you need to make sure to click these arrows that Eva's highlighted, which allows you to move through each section of the application.
All right, so this is the section where we now have question and answers. So we'll just start from the top. We have 33 questions. Um, are you eligible if your only directorial credit is as a co-director? Yes, you are. So I think this is looking at the prior work. If you have one prior feature and you are a co-director, yes, you are eligible to apply.
The next one is this attendee saw our showcase at DOC NYC. Thank you for going to that. I'm wondering if those projects would be considered too far along for development, just to get an idea of what you are looking for. Um, well, I think it's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, a number of those projects had actually been selected for R&D a few years ago. Most of them, I'll let Kyoko do this. She helped organize it if you want to.
Yeah. So for those who are not at the Doc NYC pitch day, each project shared about 10 minutes of an excerpt of the film. And so I would say, yes, those projects are further along. And maybe this is a good moment to just talk a little bit about the line between development and production, which is very gray. It's not a clear line. So I certainly don't want to, you know, we don't want to, we don't want folks who have already started shooting to not necessarily apply because they might not think they're in development anymore. I mean, we understand, shooting can begin in development. But I think, if you are in mid-production or late production, or I mean, even close to post-production, this is not the grant for you, but it's fine if you're in development and you began shooting. But it really is intended to be early on, and I think this is something I forgot to mention earlier in the timeline section, is that we recognize that development can mean different things in different parts of the world and with different funds. Funders have different definitions. I would say with a lot of European funds that are where you have to have production fully funded before you can officially enter production. Um, in that case, a lot of, projects are considered to be in development for a very long time. We don't necessarily think of development in that way, meaning that, we don't consider you to still be in development if you have not raised all of your funds for your project. It is more really thinking about the early stage of a film, before you're getting into the majority of your production. So it's not something that we define based on whether or not you're still raising money for a film, in other words. Okay. Oh, there was just a question about what is a feature length narrative. What we mean by that is just a film that is a fiction film. So in terms of the prior work, it has to have been a documentary, not a narrative or fiction film. See, my partner and I thought of and are executive producing our project. We have hired a film production with many doc and feature film credits to produce and direct our documentary. Can my partner apply? I think if you're not directing the film, then you cannot apply. And what I mean by that is you have the lead applicant who needs to be the director of the film. So you could apply if you're executive producing it, but the director has to be listed on the application and they have to be eligible and meet all the other eligibility requirements.
Mhm. We also had a question similar to that, which is around if our production company has two eligible projects from two different directors, we can still submit two different applications. Is that correct? Should it be us, the producer, who submits the application, or the directors individually? So, as Kyoko mentioned, it still should be the directors who are individually applying. Um, if your production company has multiple projects, that's okay. We also just want to note that for certain questions on the application, it still should come from the director. So, including the access and accountability section, those should still be individually written.
Yeah. And the producers, you all can work together on the application, but some of those questions, really should be crafting that together with the director to understand how, they're approaching
Mhm.
making the film. Will there be a webinar on Accelerator Lab Grant? Yes, that will be updated in hopefully in February for the open call, which will launch in March, and there will be, yeah, a webinar for that later. I'm working in a development project. That's a documentary, but I'm planning to be the director, producer, and filming the project. I'm making the teaser for the application. Yes, many of our applicants are the camera operator, director, and producer, so you certainly can apply. Um, and we also recognize that with some of these projects, your crew might be a lot smaller at this stage, and that's perfectly fine. It might be that you're starting it out as the director, producer, and DP, playing all these multiple roles. You might also be the editor. That's totally fine.
What is the timeline for application deadline, notification, and work start? This is also on the website, but as a reminder for the deadline, the early bird deadline is January 7th for the $20 application fee, and the regular application deadline is February 4th for the $35 application fee. The notification will roughly be in mid-July, and then we will disperse the grant late July to August 2026.
Yeah. Um, Accelerator Lab, is there a pre-recorded video from last year? Yes, I believe it is.
On our YouTube channel?
Yeah,
Yeah.
might not be linked from our website, but
Mm.
it will come up if you look for it
Yeah.
on.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, can I jump in? Regarding that question, yes, we made a video last year from the Accelerator Lab, but because we were also changing the format and the questions, I would
Mm.
say like it's not something I would point people to or I would reference. I would wait for our next webinar for this upcoming open call rather than referencing something from last year. So that because a lot of things are changing in this 1 year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
very good point.
In the budget, is it necessary to include and provide supporting documentation for other contributions received up to date? I don't think it's something, I mean, it can help, but I don't think it's something we require.
No, I mean, I'm assuming that would be something like a grant agreement. We don't
Yeah.
ask for anything like that.
Mm.
It's very helpful for us to know if it's pending or
Yes.
projected. Have you pending would be something you've applied for. Projected might be something you haven't applied for yet, but are planning to, and then secured would be, or confirmed would be, something that you have actually received. And so it's helpful to know the difference between those things. Um, if the director is a male, but I'm the creator and co-director or recreator, am I still eligible? Well, if you are a woman or a gender expensive director and you're co-directing with a male director, that's you are eligible. But yeah, please take a look at our website, which has more on this, um, just to confirm. But yes.
Uh, can I apply for the development grant if my first documentary is about to be ready by March 2026
Hmm.
and I am exploring options for broadcasting? Nothing secured yet, but trying and hopefully by mid next year may have broadcasting for the first documentary. I think as we noted, needs to have premiered by May of 2026, or if you have a broadcast secured by then, it would be eligible. But if not, we ask that you apply the following year once your film has premiered.
Yeah. I think we had said a festival premiere, but I don't think we're necessarily
Hmm.
tied to a festival premiere, so broadcast would be fine.
Yeah.
But we'd need to know that that was confirmed by then.
Please explain the difference between eligibility for the Accelerator Lab and the Research and Development grants.
Yeah. Do
Do
you
you
want
want
me
to
to?
yeah, okay.
Yeah. Again, it's hard to define the difference between development and production, right? Um, you know, Accelerator Lab is really for films that are in production. Um, I mean, when you apply for the Accelerator Lab, you have to have a 7-minute sample with multiple scenes. So that kind of gives you a sense of the type of stage we're looking for, because you really, at that point for the Accelerator Lab, have to have a good sense of what the story is. you really need to have the footage, right, to provide that sample, and very much be in active production, early to mid-production. Whereas research and development, you may have just started shooting, you might have no footage. Um, but I would say you still need to kind of be able to articulate why you believe this should be a feature, even at this stage. So you're starting to think about the story, what you might be following, really be able to articulate that you have enough access and, or certainly for development, less so for research, but for a story that is going to require a feature length. But you're not, maybe you've started shooting a little bit, but you're not like, you're not, you're in early production, if anything, I would say, versus Accelerator Lab where, you should really be like um closer to mid-production. What makes for a competitive research application? How far along in the process should one be before applying? I don't know, Will, do you mind taking that? I feel
Sure.
like
Well, in terms of competitive research application, because there is no, at that point, likely visual sample to look at, we're really looking for a project that has a unique question that you're trying to answer in the next phase. What is the sort of thing you want to be able to either delve deeper into or begin sort of looking at in terms of the project and the topic that you're trying to explore? And because there's going to be very little visual materials to look at, it's really also going to come down to the prior work, I would say. We're going to be looking at that quite closely in terms of what is the artistry you sort of have explored in the past and how it fits into your current body of work. And in terms of how far along in the process should one be, I mean, it can be very, very early. I mean, if there's an archive in somewhere that you want to travel to and look at, like, it can be something as early as that, I would say.
yeah, I would just add that the important thing is having very clear activities that
Mhm.
support your research. Um, you do want to have more than just an interesting idea. You want to be starting to think about, even at this stage, that again, this is going to really necessitate a feature to tell this story. You don't have to have the whole story figured out or anything like that, but like, why a feature? And then, yeah, very clear activities that are going to help move the project forward to, um, secure secondary sources or other sources, participants, potential collaborators. So there, again, very clear activities that are going to help advance the project. Um, All right. I am an Indian-based filmmaker. Since I have a film that is 45 minutes in length, with a Polish co-production, another was a short 25 minutes, and a third is something under dispute, and I did not get credits. May I please ask for a waiver and allowance to apply for my. I think, I think for this question, it sounds quite complicated. You could email us, and we would have to probably better understand. But technically, if it's something under, 45 minutes would be under what we would consider a feature length. Um, so, but you could email us. And I'm trying to find the email address. So the email for research and development, I think we have it in the chat too, but it's research-development@chickeneggfilms.org. Okay, please clarify the difference between connection and point of view and access to story. Yeah, I knew this question was going to come up. Because they are quite related. So the question that we have, Give me a second. I'm trying to find it. Okay, connection and point of view in the core app. The question is, what is your connection to the story, i.e., to the participants, themes, community, location, archives? How do your interests, motivations, and/or worldview shape your approach to this story? What lens, perspective, insights, or bias do you bring to the story? So they are very similar because our question is access to story participants, which is the question is please describe your level of access to your subject matter, lead participants, or organization institutions. So the main difference is that again they're very related, but I think the connection and point of view is a little more about positionality and acknowledging your own lens and perspective and bias, whereas the access question, and this might be very simple or more complicated depending on what kind of access you need in order to make your film, but I think it's an opportunity to get into more detail about um, access, so the connection question, I think, could be more about how did you hear about the story? How did you meet this person? How are you connected to them? Whereas the access question might be addressing some of the hurdles that you might have to access, it might be more about whether or not there are certain challenges that you're going to have with the protagonists or participants in terms of their participation or access to an archive or licensed material or materials that you might have to license, things like that.
Someone wanted us to explain again the list of completed versus planned activities in the checklist. So this is the section that we want to see you're clear on the next steps that we feel confident for receiving this grant and how it'll accelerate your project. Um, so the completed activities section can include, you've conducted pre-interviews or you identified potential participants, and planned activities are the activities you want to do within that 8-month grant period that you can see being completed once we check in with you in June of 2027. So those can include visiting an archive or writing a first draft of creative treatment, just really tangible things that will help advance your project.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
We are at times, and I can't see how many, again, I have the cursor of death, but I can't see how many other questions remaining. Like if you guys want to look through the remaining ones and see if there's
Sure.
anything that stands out, and maybe we spend 5 more minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Anything that we haven't yet gone over?
You already went over connections.
There's a question about whether or not we can send a short description of the proposed doc to see if you're interested in the subject matter. Unfortunately, no, because it's not just about the proposed project. We're also interested in your past work. So I think we're not quite set up to receive, sort of LOIs or shorter descriptions of the project ahead of the application process, unfortunately. I do understand the reason for the question, but yeah, we're not set up to do that right now. So we just encourage you to apply. Um, what else? Can we start applying, save, and come back? Yes, I think you can save all of your work at any point in the application process. Fiscal sponsors are not required at the time of the application. You will need to secure one once you are awarded the grant, but you don't need to have one currently.
Could you please clarify this once again? Does a fund need to be in place? And is the minimum required amount 35% of the total production budget? No, you do not need to have had funds secured. We would likely want to see maybe a rough fundraising strategy you possibly have, funds that you're thinking about applying to or have applied, but you don't need to have had any major fundraising. And I think the 35% figure was if you had raised that much, you may not be as competitive. Is that right, Kyoko?
Line. So this 35% is not strict by any means, but basically we're saying if you've raised over 35% of your total budget, not just your development budget, um, but that could be production or post-production, then, you might not be as competitive. We're just trying to give you a sense of how early we're looking for applications. Again, this is research and development grant is for earlier
Yeah.
projects. So if you've raised over half of your budget or more, you're certainly going to be too far along for this.
Let's maybe do two more questions.
Sure. I think there was one around, I just lost it. Are we supposed to not move on the project after applying because there will be a 6 months between application and results? So must the list of activities start after mid-July?
Mm, I would say no. I mean, I
Yeah.
think just whatever yeah, I hear what you're saying. There is the time between applying and being awarded. You can list activities that would be taking place during that time. We certainly would love to know that your application was moving forward while it's being reviewed. So it doesn't have to start, your planned activities can be taking place while it's being reviewed. There aren't restrictions on how the money can be spent. Not really. I mean, it's very open and we don't ask for receipts. We don't ask for detailed reporting. We do want to we do want some reporting and understanding how the grant funds are used, but, we don't ask for receipts and we're quite open and flexible on how the money can be spent.
Okay. Is there anything else
Yeah.
jumping out at you guys before we wrap?
Do
We
you
don't
also,
really
oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, we
Uh,
don't have a mentorship component to the program exactly, but there is that check-in with chicken and egg staff. You also become a part of the alumnus if you are awarded, which does come with other opportunities, like someone mentioned the DOC NYC showcase, for instance, and we are try to find ways to support projects beyond the program year. But in terms of, yeah, there is no like mentorship exactly for this program, unlike our other programs that do have more wraparound support. Mhm. Sorry, we'll cut you off.
no. I was going to answer that question too.
Oh, okay.
Beat me to it. But I think, yeah, maybe for some of the more um, specific questions to your eligibility, you can reach out to research-development@chickeneggfilms.org and we'll reply over email. Yeah, I don't know if there's any other questions right now that we can answer, but